All right, thank you everybody for joining. We will be doing a Q&A at the end of the presentation. So if you have questions that come up during the presentation, please type them in the chat and we'll make sure that we get to your questions once the presentation is over. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started. So the Texas State Legislature. We're going to talk a little bit about the basics first and just how the legislature works. Then we'll go into a little bit more information about what some of the protocols are for how to engage with lawmakers during COVID, and just some general tips and tricks for how to successfully advocate for your priorities, whether that's public education priorities or something else that you would like to advocate for in your own time. So, starting with the basics, the Texas State Legislature has two chambers, just like the Congress, the federal Congress. There's a House of Representatives and Senators. They meet for 140 days every 2 years, which for a state as big as Texas, with a budget as big as Texas, is not very frequent. So that means that when the legislature is in session, we have very little time to get our voices heard and to work towards the priorities that we care about, because the process moves very quickly. And all of your legislators, your representatives and your senators, they represent the local districts by introducing bills, serving on committees, and voting with their full body to advance those bills to the other one or to the governor to become law. The timeline of the Texas State Legislature, so back in November, pre-filing began, which meant that lawmakers could start submitting bills that they wanted to pass to law, even before the session actually began on January 12th, which was a couple of weeks ago. March 12th is the deadline for lawmakers to file bills, including joint resolutions, which are bills that are sort of a joint project of both the House and the Senate, emergency appropriations, and other emergency matters submitted by the governor. And May 31st is when the session ends. So the different lawmakers have different roles. Committee members ask questions of people who come to committee hearings. They vote whether to approve bills to the full House and the full Senate. Both the House and the Senate have committees, so they're broken down so that smaller groups of legislators can do maybe a bit of a deeper dive into the bill to decide whether it should move on to the full House or to the full Senate for a debate and a vote. And this is really important because a bill can die in committee if the committee members decide not to move it on at all. And then that means that the rest of the legislature never gets a chance to vote on that or to advance that or for that bill to become law. The House of Representatives is overseen by the House Speaker, and the House Speaker appoints committees and allows House members to speak or ask questions when there's debate about a bill on the floor. And they also refer bills to committees. So they decide which committee gets to decide whether that bill advances. And that can be really important because sometimes bills don't end up in the committee that seems obvious. And I think Edna's going to talk a little bit about that later. And then the other folks that are important to know about are the Lieutenant Governor, who, similar to the House Speaker, appoints committees in the Senate, and recognizes or declines to recognize senators to bring up the bill for a vote, and refers bills to Senate committees. So they have very similar roles over their respective bodies of government. And then, of course, the governor. The governor can declare emergency items, which are considered within the first 60 days of the session, and the governor can veto bills or sign bills into law. A veto is not final, but we will get there momentarily. So the state legislature, the process of how it works in the House, and forgive me for these little arrows, this is displaying differently in full screen than it was when I was working on it earlier. But the process for how a bill that originates in the House, so a bill that was authored by a member of the House of Representatives, would work, is that bill would be introduced. The House Speaker would refer it to a committee. the bill will either pass in committee or die in committee. And then if it passes through the committee, the calendars committee, which this was so confusing to me when I first started doing this, is a committee of the House of Representatives. The calendars committee will get that bill next, and they will schedule that bill for a floor vote. The important thing to note with the calendars committee is that, like any other committee, a bill can die in the calendars committee as well. So it can pass through the committee it was assigned to, whether that's, you know, the Committee on Public Education or State Affairs or Ways and Means or whatever, and then move on to the calendars committee, and they simply never schedule it for a vote. If they do schedule it for a floor vote, there will be a debate among the House of Representatives, and then they will vote on whether or not to advance the bill to the Senate. Similarly, if the bill originates in the Senate, it will be introduced by a senator. The lieutenant governor will refer it to committee. The bill will pass or die in committee. The Senate does not have a calendars committee. So if it passes through committee, it'll just jump straight to the Senate floor after passed, and they have to agree to, or before it can go to like a debate and a vote, the senators have to agree by a 5/9 vote, and this is different than it has been in years past. I think this proportion has changed a couple of times over the last couple of sessions. But for this session, it is a 5/9 vote among the senators to decide whether to send it to the floor for a debate. So this is kind of like the Senate version of the calendars committee. And then if it is passed through that 5/9 vote, there will be a floor debate and a vote just like in the House. And then if it's passed by a majority, it will go to the House. For any bill to become a law, both House and Senate must pass it. If both bodies pass the bill, the governor can sign it into law or veto it. And if the governor chooses to veto it, a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate can override that veto, and it will then become law. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Edna now to talk a little bit more about the important steps in the process and some of the specificities of it.
Okay, thank you, Gabriella. One of the things I wanted to point out about the role of the lieutenant governor, which is different from the speaker, is that the lieutenant governor must acknowledge a senator who wishes to speak to bring up a bill for consideration in the Senate. And if he refuses to acknowledge that senator, the bill dies. The speaker does not have that power. The calendars committee sets bills for consideration before the full House, and they kind of go through their calendar and get to the bills as they are in order. But it's a very important power that the lieutenant governor has that a lot of people don't realize. And the other thing I wanted to point out before we go through the rest of these slides is that the governor can declare certain items as an emergency, which means that they can be heard within, there's a prohibition on action being taken on bills for the first 60 days of the session. But if the governor declares an item an emergency, the legislature can go ahead and take action on those bills within the first 60 days. And he has just announced today that he will give his State of the State address on Monday, February the 1st. And that's at that time, he will be declaring certain items, emergency items. So where are we? All right, so milestones, committee assignments. There are certain committees that are plum committees. You know, obviously the budget committee. The budget committees in both the House and the Senate. And the Senate is called the Finance Committee, in the House it's called Appropriations. The education committees as well. And state affairs in both the House and the Senate are committees that a lot of sort of controversial bills get referred to. So being chair of that committee is a very plum assignment. And a committee chair has a discretion whether to set a bill for hearing or not. So that committee chair also holds a lot of power in determining whether a bill is going to go forward or not. Committee hearings it's going to be very different during COVID. I'm not quite sure how they're going to handle these hearings. We'll learn as we go along, but a bill has to be set for a hearing, and then the committee votes, or the committee, many times, especially in public education on the House side, after a hearing, the committee chair would leave the bill pending and bring it up for a vote at another meeting or not. And if not, the bill dies. Next slide, please. Next slide. So here are all the committees, and there may be a few others that come up as surprises where some of the bills that we follow are assigned to. Obviously, appropriations on the House side and finance on the Senate side are the budget bills. And HB3, one of our biggest priorities, as well as other districts' priorities, is full funding for House Bill 3. That's going to be decided in appropriations and in finance. Then obviously public education on the House side and education on the Senate side are where the bulk of the bills that we follow are assigned to. But then there are other committees like environmental regulation. There have been bills the past few sessions, and there's a bill again this session regarding Kelly full funding for House Bill 3, which gave raises to teachers, dyslexia, and increased the comp ed allotment, gave more funding per student of over $1,000. So that's what will be decided in appropriations and finance. There was a question in the chat. All right, so environmental regulation, lead in water fountains. That will probably go to environmental regulation. Elections, there have been attempts in the past, there have been bills in the past that have set November elections only, whereas school districts currently can have May elections. Also, some of the bond bills that either put limitations on bond elections or require a lot of information to be included on the ballot for a bond election. Sometimes we'll go to elections, sometimes we'll go to state affairs, sometimes may go to ways and means. Transportation, we don't see very many bills there, but we've had a couple of priorities for Austin ISD that would permit our school buses to use toll roads without paying the toll, and that will likely go to transportation. Next slide, please. So protocols during COVID. On the Senate side, everyone that comes on the Senate floor and goes to committee hearings must have a COVID test. And they will be given a wristband to show that they have tested negative for COVID before they're allowed to enter certain areas in the Senate. On both sides, on the Senate side and the House side, all visitors, committee witnesses, committee attendees, and legislators will have to wear masks. And there is a tent on the north side of the Capitol where the rapid COVID tests are given. Next slide. As I just mentioned, no COVID test is required on the House side, although 4 House members have tested positive for COVID. This is, I think, a fluid situation, and it may be that the House changes its mind in the future if more House members contract COVID. Some House members aren't even showing up at the Capitol because they're being very careful. But they do have to wear masks, and they can be removed. The masks can be removed if a member is speaking from a microphone. Next slide. Public hearings. So you can sign up, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, to be notified when a bill is set for hearing, or you can be notified whenever a certain committee is holding a hearing. The notice has to give the meeting location, and it will also indicate whether the testimony is open to the public or is open by invitation only. So sometimes committees will have a hearing and have invited testimony only. They've had a few of these types of hearings on the Senate side, and the witnesses appear by video or by Zoom. The committee notices will provide information about the health and safety protocols that the committee will impose, and they will also provide a link for where you can watch the meeting via your computer. Next slide. So for a public hearing, individuals can testify, and I know there's several of you on the call who've testified at hearings, and you know that you go to a kiosk in the Capitol. I think the Senate, the House is all by kiosk, where you register the day of the hearing to testify, or you can, if you don't want to testify, you can register support for or against a bill, and we'll talk about the importance of that in a little while. You can also submit written testimony without testifying, but you still have to register at the kiosk. The Senate, some committees have not used kiosks. You actually have to go to the hearing room and fill out a card that you turn into the committee clerk. It may be that they're going to go fully into using kiosks on the Senate side, but we'll see. I wanted to also mention on registering for or against a bill. On the House side, the House adopted rules 2 weeks ago or so. And they indicate in those rules that the committee minutes or the committee report on a bill does not have to indicate the names of the people or organizations that registered for or against a bill. And this is a big change, because I tell you, as a former Senate staffer, you know, both the House and the Senate staff people are just inundated during the session, because there are so many bills filed and there's so much to keep up with, that when a bill is going to come up for a vote and you have on the floor of the Senate or the House, you have very little notice, at least on the Senate side, and especially towards the end when things are just moving very quickly. And I know that I, as other staffers do, we would look at the committee report and see who registered for or against a bill. And when I would see that all these teacher groups and all of these school districts and all of these education-related associations and, you know, people and organizations I knew to be good and pro-public ed, I would say, okay, we're for this bill. And so just seeing that list is a huge help to staff. So in a little while, we're going to talk about what to do, what I suggest people do since this rule passed. Next slide. And then the House rules also, I've not seen this in the past, that says that committee chairpersons shall use their best efforts to invite witnesses that represent different viewpoints to testify, and that if members of that committee ask the chair that certain witnesses be invited to testify, that the committee chair must comply with that request. The rules also say that a member of the committee can request, I believe it's only up to 2 people be invited to testify. And invited witnesses may testify by video conferencing. I still don't know how the public's supposed to testify, so stay tuned for that. Next. So public engagement during COVID. Call or email your legislator's office. Each legislator is going to set its own rules for how they're going to handle constituents coming by their office. I've reached out to all of our Travis County legislators to find out how they're operating, and I've heard from 3 of them. And as we hear from them, we've listed on our website, if you go to our website and go to our legislative page, Vicki Goodwin, both Vicki Goodwin and Celia Israel have said that their capital offices are closed to visitors, that meetings will be conducted virtually. We've provided their email addresses to where you should call, and their phone number where you should call to share your position on bills. And then if you want to request a Zoom meeting, we've provided information as to whom you should contact in those respective offices. Senator Campbell's office has said that they're closed to visitors right now and should contact their chief of staff, which we will add that to our website. So as I hear from them, I will add that to our website so that you don't have to call yourself, and you can just go to our website, and they don't have to take all of these calls. They don't have to hear from 200 people. So, and I would also say that because it's going to be so different this session, that you wouldn't be out of line if you contacted a member of a committee. That if you have a very specific story to tell or feel compelled to give testimony on a particular bill, you might reach out to that legislator, even if that legislator on the committee does not represent you, to see if they might invite you to testify. It doesn't hurt to try. Next. So as I mentioned a while ago, registering for or against a bill, we still don't know how they're going to do that. I don't know if they're going to require that people go in person to the Capitol and register that on the kiosk, or whether they'll have some other method. But as soon as we find out, we'll post that on our website. The other thing is that I just noticed today that there are a couple of town hall meetings that Aaron Zwiener, who represents Hayes and Blanco counties, is holding on Thursday, this Thursday at 6. And also Vicki Goodwin has set 3 upcoming town hall meetings. One is this Thursday at 6 p.m. And then she has 2 more in February. And we'll post those on our website as well, so that you don't have to look them up. But I found out about Vicki Goodwin's February meetings by Googling her town hall meeting. And I knew about the one on Thursday because I get her emails, but I didn't know about the ones in February. So we'll be sure and post those on our website. But you can also reach out to legislators to attend a virtual community meeting that you set up. So, you know, if you have your PTA or your neighborhood group or another group, certainly I would recommend that you reach out to the legislator scheduler and see if the legislator can attend the meeting. And maybe before you set a date, maybe you have 2 or 3 dates and times to offer them and see if they're available. And then the other thing is that if you can't testify at a committee hearing, I would go ahead and either call the members of the committee, even though they're not your legislator, or email them and tell them what your position on the bill is, so that they will have a record of your position. Next slide. So is this you, Gabriella? No?
I'm on mute. Yes, this is me. So if you are planning on engaging with your lawmakers in any way that's somewhat more personal, whether that's email, phone call, trying to set up a Zoom meeting, just a few helpful tips as you go into that. So one of the most important things to do is to prepare, of course, like with anything, preparation is key. So first you want to do your research to know the issue. And that doesn't mean that you need to be an expert in, legal or policy language. It just means like maybe you need to know the bill number of a bill that's been proposed and who's authored it. And if bills like that have been proposed in the past and failed, things like that, just very basic stuff. But in general, you don't need to be an expert. You're already an expert just by being a person who cares and has a personal connection to these issues. And then you want to consider your strategy. So taking the resources you have, whether that's, a lot of fellow supporters or a very powerful personal story, or in the case of some of you on this call who do have very specific professional expertise that would relate to the topic, then that's, a resource as well. And how can you leverage the resources you have to turn into the power that you need to influence lawmakers to produce the policy result that you're looking for. Messaging is also very important. You want to make sure that you own your story or you own your expertise. Like I said, nobody needs to be an expert. You don't need to know everything about law. You don't need to know everything about policy. You don't even necessarily need to know everything about like school finance or how the district works. What you need to know is your own life, which you already know and you're already an expert in. You need to know how these issues affect you and your children, your students, your employment, if you're an Austin ISD employee, why you care about it, and what it is that is compelling you to talk to that person and advocate for what it is you're advocating for. Then, of course, you need to identify your legislators, and the two most important questions there are who represents me and who will have the greatest effect on the issue. So
Hi.
a lot of times the person who represents
mailing these two.
Oop. Somebody else is talking.
Sending them. Just regular standard.
Okay, I just muted everybody. So sorry about that. So identifying your legislators, who represents you and who will have the greatest effect on the issue. A lot of times the person who represents you may not be the most impactful person to contact because they don't sit on a committee that matters to that bill, or you already know that they're super supportive of that. And that doesn't mean that it's not worth contacting them and saying, thank you for your support of public education priorities. I hope you continue to be an advocate for our students in House District, whatever House District you live in. But it might be more vital to contact lawmakers that might not represent you, but sit on very important committees. So like Edna said, you can email them, you can contact them, you can try to get invited to testify. And then the main thing to remember as you are approaching any sort of advocacy efforts is that the more personal your approach, the higher the impact. So if you can come into it with a personal story or personal expertise, if you can connect with the lawmaker human to human, or resident of their district to person that was elected to represent that district, that is going to be much more impactful than just like sending out mass emails or things like social media or letter writing, postcard writing campaigns. Not that there isn't a time and a place for those, but most of us are busy people with limited time and limited resources on our hands to do this kind of advocacy. So the most powerful thing that you can do is the most personal. And I will turn it back to Edna.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add, so look at the committee members on, like say, public education. And if you are from the area, if you're originally from the area that legislator represents, or you have relatives who live in that person's district, when you reach out to them, you might, mention, even you are not my legislator. However, my parents live in your district, or my sister and my brother-in-law live in your district, etc. That sort of connects you a little bit more to that legislator, and it's going to be important to that legislator that you are related to a constituent of his or hers, and that might cause them to pay a little bit more attention. And the other thing I was going to mention as a follow-up is sometimes, legislative staff get a lot of form emails and form letters. And I know a lot of, we're all so busy that, we just want to send something to a legislator indicating what our position is, and you only have time to send the form letter. But if you can take 5 or 10 minutes to revise it, to make it more personal, it'll stand out. And I know, because when I was on staff, you see form letter after form letter after form letter, and they're all the same, and you're like, okay, this is all the same. I don't need to read it because it's the same as the last one I read. But the ones that stand out are the ones that have a personal story. So activating your networks, and I'm going to give again a shout out to Lynn Boswell, who's on this call, who's one of our new trustees, who last session got a group of different school districts together, PTAs together, that pay recapture. And, they all got together and messaged, had a common message, strategy, etc. And the wider the reach, the more impactful it can be, because we have to reach many more legislators. We have to reach a majority of legislators to get anything passed. So doing that kind of outreach, other school districts, cities, chambers of commerce, other groups, try to do that and focus on how you can collaborate. And the other thing is also to focus on those partnerships that are represented by legislators on those key committees where the bills are referred to that we care about and that we want to influence. Churches and nonprofits are also other groups that we should think about connecting with. Next slide, please. So once a bill is referred to a committee and it hasn't been set for hearing, urge the members of that committee to ask the chair of the committee to set it for hearing. And that might get it set for hearing if he hears from his members or her members that they want it set for hearing. So that's the first step. And then if it is set for hearing, contact legislators to urge them to vote for the bill or vote against the bill or to amend it. And I would also say on amending it, like there are some bills that are good bills, but they have a provision in them that is going to have an unintended consequence that is not good. And so protocol-wise, it's best to go to the author of that bill, go to the staff member of that legislator and say, we really like your bill, but there's just this one provision that's somewhat problematic for these reasons. And I'm sure it wasn't intended, and we really urge you to make these changes to it to make it, to make it more palatable, or to make it, to make it work. So I wouldn't wait until there's a committee hearing and you've asked a member of the committee to amend it when you haven't gone to the author, because it kind of catches the author of the bill, sort of catches them off guard, and they don't appreciate it when they're caught off guard at the hearing for their bill. So go to the author of the bill first. Next slide, please. So you probably know who your lawmaker is, and if you don't, you can go to the legislative website and find out. You can, I think, go to our website and maybe find out. We have contact information for our various lawmakers. define what your message and your goals are. You know, why are you for or against this bill? And what is it about your family, your student, your child, as Gabriella said, your job if you're a teacher, and message it. Then call or email and set up the meeting. And again, during COVID, it's probably going to be a virtual meeting. And bring allies if there are other people who share your same position. Bring them along so that they see that there's sort of strength in numbers. Next slide, please. If you are, you know, a business owner, your constituent, if you have a broader reach because of your business or your membership in, say, a PTA, then you should certainly identify yourself as a member of that group. State what your purpose is, what your issue is, what your position on the bill is. As we said earlier, give your personal story, your expertise. Make your ask and say, would you support this bill, or would you please vote against this bill? And then discuss next steps. You know, what's going to happen with this bill next, and what can we expect from you, that sort of thing. Next slide, please. And then follow up. Thank the member or the staff, depending on who you met with, or send it to both of them. Just say, thank you for the meeting, appreciate your time. And if you left any materials with the legislator or the staff member and you have it, a PDF of it, you might send it to them, you might email it to them so that they can save it electronically. They're all in very small offices. I can attest to that because there was hardly any room to file anything, and you're just inundated with paper. So I always appreciated getting things by email that I could file electronically. Next slide. So when you testify, be courteous, don't be mad, you know, be courteous, be concise. You only are going to have 2 to 3 minutes to testify. And believe you me, it goes by very, very fast. So those members of the Board of Trustees for Austin ISD know that, you know, that if you don't practice, I'm not saying that you guys are practicing, but you know, you can tell when a witness or a member of the public is cut off, that they didn't get to the most, sometimes didn't get to the most important part of their message. So write out your testimony, be concise, get to the most important things, and time yourself. Read your testimony out loud at home and time yourself. And if it's too long, then go back and edit and be more concise, because you want to get your point across. Be personal. If you have a personal story about how this has affected your family, your student, yourself, like hats off to the TAMSA moms. Their personal stories about the 15 tests and what a toll it was taking on their children and on their families was really so powerful. And I think is what probably got the tests whittled down from 15 to whatever it is, 5. And be truthful. If you have written testimony that you want to follow up with, like if you don't have time in your 2 to 3 minutes and you want to expand on your testimony or provide more information, do it in writing and bring enough copies for each of the committee members. And then again, follow up, as I said in the earlier slide, follow up with members, thanking them and sending them your written testimony. Next slide, please. Now, if you want to testify and you're an Austin ISD employee, if what you want to testify about is one of our legislative priorities, we may ask you to testify. But if you know about it, maybe through a group that you belong to, bilingual educators or some other group that you belong to, educator group, and you want to testify, you can contact me, and Frank and I will help you with your draft your testimony, and we'll walk you through the process. We will go with you to the Capitol. We'll help you sign up. We'll walk you through it. Now, if you are an employee of AISD, next slide, and you want to testify about a subject that is not a priority that was approved by the Board of Trustees. Next slide, Gabriella. Yeah, so if the bill does not pertain to a priority that the board has approved, but you would like to testify, if you are taking time during the workday, you need to take personal leave or vacation time. And you need to also make clear in your testimony that you are testifying in your personal capacity. You can identify yourself as I'm a teacher or I'm a employee, but whatever, but make clear that you're testifying in your personal capacity and not on behalf of the district. Next slide. So you can also, like I have signed up for alerts from TASB, Texas Association of School Boards, and you can sign up for text alerts. I have signed up for Raise Your Hand Texas texts, and also the Coalition for Public Schools, and there are probably other groups out there that you have a particular interest in that that follow the legislature very closely, and you may want to sign up for their alerts. Next slide. You can go to the legislative website and sign up for alerts. You can follow particular bills and create your own list of bills. You can sign up for email notifications when when there's any action on your bill. If it gets referred to a committee, you get a ping and you get alerted as to which committee it's been assigned to. If it's set for hearing, you get an alert about that. You can sign up by bill number, by bill subject, and then there are other alerts. And you can also get notified on your mobile device. Next slide, please. So if you go to the home page, capitol.texas.gov, on the far right side of the home page, there's video broadcasts, and it's divided up into House and Senate, and you can go to whichever one. Like today I watched the Senate on the Senate floor. There's calendars that you can see which bills are being considered. You can look at what meetings are set that particular day. You can see what bills were filed that day, and you can also see what votes were taken that day. So it's a kind of a one-stop shop on their homepage. Next slide. And that's it. We have time for questions. So Gabriella or Allie, are y'all handling the questions?
Gosh, I'm on mute. This has been my whole day is just me being on mute. So my colleague, Allie Gallarducci from the community engagement team is going to be facilitating the Q&A. So y'all feel free to just popcorn out the questions.
Yeah, and right now, I noticed that we don't have any questions just yet. So I was just going to kind of start possibly asking, and if you haven't done so already, are there any bills that you wanted? I know we spent last time that we gathered a group, we went over AISD's legislative priorities. So I'm curious if there's anything that you wanted to bring attention to that you know of that's already kind of coming up that you would want to tell our guests about.
Yeah, we have on our website a table that shows what bills support our priorities. So Gina Hinojosa, yay for Gina Hinojosa. She has filed so many good bills that support our priorities. So if you go to our website, which is austinisd.org, I'm trying to get there now, you'll see a table that, so you go austinisd.org legislature, and there is a table
I'm
that,
gonna go ahead and I'm gonna share my screen and walk y'all through it. Edna, you'll just have to tell me what to click on when.
okay, so go to go to bills. So there's on the left side, there's legislature, bills, and how to be involved. Go to bills, and then go to view a list of bills supporting AISD's priorities. And so you can see there that the second priority is broadband, and there are a couple of bills that you can see they relate to it. They don't necessarily support. I would go down further on the more specific ones. Okay, so there we go. The first one under education funding. So support funding based on enrollment rather than attendance. And Jeannie Hinojosa has filed House Bill 1246, and you can click on it and actually go to the bill. And you can go to text. Go to text, and you can actually see the bill and read it. And then that first page where the text was, you're going to see more, more things populated as the session goes on there. So if you'll go back to the bills that support our priorities and go further down on education funding. So special needs, Senator Menendez has filed a bill. If you go down to accountability and assessment, you'll see some other bills there. So Gina Hinojosa has also filed House Bill 807 relating to the accountability system. Though this is the Rosedale bill. So she filed this bill last session, and it had a good hearing, good audience. I think it was just a little bit too late in the session to get it through. But this is another one of our priorities. And if you go further down, so you can basically go to, we will update this list every week, and it'll be updated by every Friday. And I send out the Friday email. You can see, there's a bunch on charter schools as well. We have 5 separate priorities on charter schools. And so you can go through and see these. So this is where you can find out which bills support or relate to our priorities.
And it's looking like no other questions yet, except someone had asked if we could maybe highlight some of the legislative priorities. Can you maybe help us navigate to where they could find those on the website, and then maybe just touch on a few of the biggies?
The priorities, yeah, so there you go. You found it, Gabriella. So there are priorities, and I mentioned this before, maybe at the last session, that the board this session decided on sort of 5 big priorities, and then they also approved what we're calling an appendix, which are also priorities, but they're very much more specific priorities, like the charter school priorities, like the accountability assessment priorities, the funding priorities. So I think there are about 28 of those, which you can find in the appendix. And the reason that we do this is because when a legislator asks, what's AISD's position on this bill, on X bill, like Jeannie Hinojosa's bill on enrollment versus on funding enrollment versus attendance. And if the board had not approved that priority, I couldn't tell them that we have a position on it. But because they did, we can. We say our position as that we support funding based on enrollment. So these are the big 5, the 3 that support and the 2 that oppose. And if you'll go to the other one, Gabriella, that's the appendix. That's where you find the more specific ones. So we've divided them up into these larger subject areas, charter schools, education funding, etc. So you can see the more specific ones. And then I wanted to also point out that Daphne in the chat, I think, pointed out that social media is another avenue for communicating. And let's see, where's Daphne? Did you put that in the, is the chat still there? And ACPTA is another resource. She's going to post a meeting every week of the session with timely information about bills and issues. And you can join their Google group.
Another question I'm seeing that just popped up, Edna, was if you could elaborate on priority number 5 about the disproportionate discipline. Do you have any more insight to share on that priority?
Yes, and so in AISD as well as in other school districts, we find that there is a disproportionate effect of disciplinary actions on Black and Hispanic students. And we support efforts to, let me go back to that particular one to see how we worded it. We want to support legislation that would decrease the disproportionate impact on Black and Hispanic students, whatever that is. And so I know that our board and our staff at AISD is working on it as a school district, but we want the state to address the issue as well.
Thank you. We still have a few more minutes. If we want to give everyone a few more moments to gather their ideas, if they have any other questions that Edna could address for folks.
Oh, so I saw Daphne's, so Daphne is the advocacy chair for ACPTA. And she says that a representative told me this week that they pay attention to social media a lot these days. She said tagging representatives on social media with your personal stories can be effective.
It's a great idea.
That is from Daphne. And let me see if any other people in the chat have some ideas. So great ideas. I appreciate your advocacy cheerleading, Daphne.
I see Marissa shared with us that she had invited Representative Hinojosa to one of her classes. She's a teacher, and she actually came to her classroom last Friday. So she's suggesting that if you know any teachers, that might be a good thing to do, is reach out to Representative to come present to your class.
Yeah.
Looks like Representative Hinojosa is very busy because she also went to a Girl Scout meeting.
Yeah. And so, yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, we've thought about inviting them to some of our like renovated schools like Ann Richards and others, and just didn't know how comfortable they will feel with COVID and such, but I guess it doesn't hurt to ask. We can ask Gina and Hosa, she'll go. And we should invite.
All right. Well, that's our time for this evening. Thank you everybody for joining. I will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow with the slides, as well as with information about just other resources, like some of the things we showed you, our bill tracker, our how to get involved page, which has hyperlinks to some of the places that we referenced in our presentation, as well as a survey. So y'all can let us know how we're doing and how this event was for you, and if you learned a lot and how we can improve. And I will also be probably like at the end of this week sending recordings of this event, as well as the previous 2 events in the series. So for those of you who weren't on the previous 2 events, there were 2 events leading up to this. One where we talked at length about the legislative priorities that we just talked about a little bit, and one where we talked about school finance in great detail, because that's probably one of the most complicated state legislative issues that affects our schools. And we will be uploading recordings of that, and we will send links to those as well to all participants, hopefully by the end of this week, perhaps early next week. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and have a great night. And I hope y'all participate a little bit in this legislative session.
Thank you. Bye.